workers, good news to you I'll tell, of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? My daddy was a miner, now he's an heir and son, and I'll stick with the Union till every battle's won. Which side are you on? Tell me, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on? They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. You're either with the Union or a thug for J.H. Blair. Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Oh, workers, can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a lousy scab, or will you join us hand in hand? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on? Don't scab for the bosses, don't listen to their lies. Us workers haven't got a chance unless we organize. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on?
All right, what are we doing today?
Today we're doing a communist movie night.
Hell yeah.
And we watched the 1976 documentary Harlan County, USA. This was directed by Barbara Koppel.
So this was made in like the 70s, right? Like 74?
Yeah, 76.
76.
The premise of the movie is it's documenting a strike in Harlan County, Kentucky, at the Brookside Mine.
Yes.
Workers there voted to join the United Mine Workers of America, the UMWA, and Duke Power Company and its subsidiary Eastover Mining Company. They refused a contract, so the miners went on strike.
Yes. So it documents that strike and kind of the aftermath of it, and throughout just really shows the need for unions and like the conditions they're working in. It's pretty crazy.
It's real interesting in terms of its focus there. It's kind of focusing on kind of what unionization looks like on the ground. I guess what we're looking at more broadly than that is not just what do unions, fight for in the immediate wages, conditions, stuff like that for the workers, but also like what is the potential for unions in terms of like their revolutionary potential.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the big points that I took away from it was the solidarity and like the local emphasis on just the community itself. Like you end up seeing the same characters over and over, and you're just, I mean, they're not characters, they're people, but
yes, you
just start recognizing them and you're just like, damn, this person's like really involved. And it's really interesting to see how that plays out within like, I mean, I'm assuming this community is pretty small.
Yeah. And they're realizing kind of together that while they may just be one person, that when they're banding together like that, they can really do things. And we'll talk about some of the moments that we see that super clearly in the documentary. And I guess one of the things that will also kind of be contrasting with that is how the union itself, while it kind of helps be this vehicle for solidarity, also kind of sometimes gets in the way of that or like tamps down on it too.
Yeah, it wasn't just like the union is perfect.
Yeah. So we'll kind of offer our analysis of that from the left.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, from the top, I want to talk about something. They start out and they keep going with a great musical selection.
Yeah, I thought you'd be super into this.
For real. It was some wonderful folk music, kind of mountain music or old time music. Great stuff. I don't know. I dig it. I dig, super old, just weird old stuff, I guess, for most people. So Hazel Dickens did a lot of it. They were in there repeatedly. The opening song, I think, is Merle Travis.
Okay.
Down in the dungeon. And they take you immediately. The first scenes are, this is what it looks like kind of from the coal miner's perspective, dropping into these mines. I mean, it was crazy. There's like no headroom, they're like laying down on those.
Yeah, they're like going in on basically a lo-fi conveyor belt and just laying down to go into work. And yeah, I do not, I don't understand. Yeah.
That's not for me, man. Being so
Definitely
cramped up in
not.
there.
That sucks.
It kind of reminded me of Snowpiercer, where the kid is in the train innards, like all cramped up,
yeah.
and they're just like also cramped far down and crouched all the time, and it looked hard. Would not want to do.
No, definitely. And like one of the first anecdotes we get is from an older man who tells a story of his boss tells him to be careful with the mule and to make sure like nothing falls on it. And the guy's like, what about me? And he's like, I have to buy another mule. I can always hire somebody else.
Yep.
And for me, that brought me right back to Open Veins, because I think they had a very similar story about like mules were worth more than like native slaves.
Yep. And that's the contradiction between capital and labor. The mule is capital. It's something you use to make money with, and sometimes the phrase human capital maybe, but we're labor, and you can always find someone else to rent out for a while.
That's something that really struck me about the horrible conditions these miners were facing, and I imagine still face. And they have a guy who talks about 300 pounds of steel fell on his head, and his work called him the next day and asked if he would come in.
Yeah, he was out of work one day, maybe, I guess that day that he was injured.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, hey, we hope you're okay. Are you all right to come back to work? I mean, right. The reason for that was, we don't want to pay for your shit. We want you making money for us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just immediately get back to it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
To me, the question arose here right off from the get-go, when you're watching everyone down in the mines, when you're talking to the old man who was singing the songs and everything and talking about how hard work was. To me, it stuck out like, why are humans doing this? Okay, on one level, you can say, well, it's needed. And especially back then, okay, when we needed some fuel, I guess, and we didn't have as many energy alternatives or what have you. But in that case, if they were doing this kind of like basically heroic national work, right, then you would expect them to be, very well respected in a rational society and like compensated and every measure taken to be sure that they're as safe as possible for doing this very needed thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you put it in like children's terms, like if you're going on a dangerous mission, you are a hero, like these people should be like fucking D&D adventurers with armor and shit.
Yeah. And like, esteemed and celebrated when they go into any town and, really taken care of, and they're not. They're like a second class citizen here throughout, and we'll keep seeing that. And it brings to mind, I guess, in the modern context, I mean, because this stuff still goes on, not as much in like our coal mines in America. Most of those are open top mines now. They have very few underground mines, so they still exist. But what we sometimes don't think as much about, I guess, is the global South or like the non-imperial core countries. This sort of stuff, whether it's textile sweatshops or rare earth mine for cell phone components, like people are still fucking getting their bodies devoured by this capitalist machine.
I mean, that's interesting. I thought about it in the opposite way. Like I said, I immediately thought of Open Veins. And I also thought of like, this has been going on, coal specifically, since the Industrial Revolution. And it looks like we haven't found any fucking better way to do it. Like, it's just, if you think about the lifetimes of bodies that have been just either directly or indirectly killed from resource extraction, it's staggering.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I will admit that like technology has somewhat improved our extraction methods, but then you also, I mean, you got to look at it from an eco-socialist standpoint too. Like the mountaintop removal to get the coal is horrible in terms of pollutants and in terms of just straight up destroying an ecosystem and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a good way to do this stuff.
And I don't know, I guess if you want to shift back to the human toll, you think, why would people subject themselves to doing these horrible jobs in other parts of the world today even? They don't have a choice, and there's a reason that the imperialist countries like want to make sure they don't do any development, or they don't, unionize, or they don't whatever, because they need there to be no alternative besides starving.
Yeah.
To make people like go work in these places.
Yeah, and that's how you get like monocultures. That's how you get, and this movie does a great example of that, where like the whole town is mining, and if you want to do something else, you either have to get one of the like 5 other jobs or leave.
Yeah, you have to be sort of a member of the local elite in that way, like petty bourgeois, sort of,
It's like, okay, you can run the one store here, or you can leave.
Yeah, and they interviewed people who were saying, oh, we're going to have to go up to wherever, we're going to have to go out to some other union state so we can work. Well, let's get into the conflict. So there's the strike, right?
Yes.
And the people are trying to organize people to go out and picket, to go out and block scab workers from coming in.
Yeah, and reminder for listeners, scabs are people who come in to work while there's a strike going on, often brought in from outside, I imagine.
Or from the community. I mean, some of these people,
it seemed like both.
Looked like they lived in the county.
Yeah.
The reason, again, this was going on is because the company was refusing the contract. They had the interview with Carl Horn, his bitch ass, who was the president of Duke Power. And he was like, oh, we made them all these offers and they refused them. It's not our fault. And it's like, dude, your offers were probably like, fuck your union,
Yeah, I'm sure the offers were not good.
And he's just like, oh, it's not my fault, so we have to keep them out. So yeah, they bring in these strike breakers who are these real like anti-communist guys, these scabs.
Yeah, definitely. They do some interviews with them, and they all like, it was kind of uncanny, bring up those anti-union sentiments like a script.
Yeah.
They're saying, well, that thing in the store is going to be more expensive because the price is going up. And I'm just like, I mean, it doesn't have to be. Like,
no, yeah.
Whose fault is that?
They're communists. They're destroying the country. Someone said the union is what's running the United States. And I was just like, if only. I mean,
I wish, dude. I fucking wish.
This is kind of just before. It's interesting because it's just before like the complete, two-fist throttling of the union movement.
Demolition.
Yeah, by like Reagan, and we'd already kind of started with neoliberalism here, but that's like the complete death knell apocalypse of it when Reagan enters in and just, murders the union movement.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I think, in today's context especially, you don't have a lot of people that understand. And I think they did a really good job of showing it in this documentary that it's a continuous struggle and it's a continuous fight. And that like the reason we have things like the fucking 8-hour work week is because of unions. And like, you just have to keep going. And it just seems like if we don't memorialize that, or if we don't remind people of that, like it's very easy to villainize, I guess, unions. I mean, not for me, but I guess for other people it is.
Well, yeah, you take for granted that, the companies are nice enough to give us these things. Why are we agitating for more and making things more expensive, basically, is what those guys were saying, right? Not realizing that the company was not nice enough to give you those things. It was forced to.
No, yeah, they will not give you anything unless they have to. Like, there's no such thing as a free lunch for them.
Think about this. There was the interview with the old man. Very old, and he was talking about when he was working at 10 years old.
Oh my God, yeah, that was crazy.
He said, I was working 10 years old, 6 cents an hour. He was a breaker boy. And what that means was they were all perched over conveyor belts of coal and slate, and he had to pick out the slate from the coal as it went by.
Yeah.
And if he didn't, the overseer guy would just go beat them.
Yeah, it looked horrifying.
Yeah, it was just like, it was hell, and they were just sitting there in it. And so they eventually went on strike, and he talks about kind of this, like the resistance they met from their union comes out there and says, hey, like, come on, we got a contract, right? The politicians come out and they say, well, come on, like, we're going to do a law, we're going to compromise. And
then they get like their pastors and stuff, like
the parish priest comes out and is on their side too. It reminded me of the classic, like the pyramid of capitalism thing.
I thought the same thing. Like, this is just the superstructure fucking running things. They all support each other to get what they want.
Yeah. And he's like, okay, the company raised our pay. I learned that they're all on the same side against me. But I don't know, to me, it reminds me of what you're saying. Like, it could and was a lot worse before unions were fighting for better conditions. And we think, oh, what do we need them for anymore? That's old.
But I think that's the thing, is there is a concerted effort to hide those conditions, like sweatshops, like the service industry even. And now we're seeing kind of how that's being shaken out in the United States.
Yeah.
People just straight refusing to take those jobs because they're fucking brutal.
Yeah, they're terrible. To set up, I guess, more of the conflict, right? On the one hand, the company is bringing in scabs. On the other hand, the union organizers are trying to get people out for the pickets. And I thought this was interesting because they had that truck with the loudspeaker and you just keep driving around. I mean, he's, talking to the people, kind of spreading some good propaganda.
Yep.
It's interesting to me because this is not some staffer from some neoliberal Democratic senator's office or something, right? From Washington. It's not somebody coming in on a unionization drive from New York or California or somewhere. It's somebody from right there.
Yeah.
Somebody from the people in the community rather than preaching to it,
Yeah. It was all we, not like, you need to do this. It was like, all right, like, are you going to be there? I'm going to be there. Like, that was very much the language throughout. Like, their organizing was like, there's this one lady. She was my favorite.
You're talking about Lois Scott?
Oh my God, I loved Lois. She was amazing. Like, she was signing people up to be on the picket line. She was just like, you can't do this from bed. You better fucking be there. Just like straight up.
I know you were in bed. Yeah. She was calling people out and getting people to commit, saying like, hey, will I see you there? Like, know, and that's, what she got to do. And she was doing this with the striking workers themselves and with the miners' wives, which I thought was an interesting, like, a central, really, part of the story here.
So, so they have these pickets, and there's men involved for sure, but I would say, like, if not half, probably maybe 60, 70% of the people that were shot, at least in the documentary, were women. I just thought that was really interesting. Like, they talk about, like, the reasons for doing that, because their, husbands are working in these dangerous conditions. They also want them to have a good pension and good pay and all these things. And they're very much like, this is my fight too. Like, I'm fighting for our kids. And like, if I have a son and they're going to work in the mines, like, we got to do this. At one point, this is kind of later on in the documentary, one of the men is just like, man, these women are out there and we're like fucking hiding behind the women. Like, we should probably show up and do something. And I'm like, you're right. Like, they've been fucking kicking ass.
Yeah, and essentially, of course, in the time, maybe it was kind of a patriarchal sort of shame mechanism working, but like, take gender out of it, like, these people are showing up to support us, but they're doing more than we are, and we're the actual like workers here, because I imagine the way it was set up is probably they were, at least in the old unions, they used to have like ladies auxiliary, but you could just have an auxiliary, it doesn't have to be ladies, but of like supporters of the union member. Yeah,
that could be their families, their friends, whoever.
And yeah, you're right. They were a lot of times focused on as much or more than the main union workers were. Lois Scott had a lot of cool lines, and
she was fucking great
throughout the movie. She was a firebrand. I mean, the first we see of her, she's saying, you've got impeach Nixon on TV. They don't do anything to those protesters, but then we do the strike and then they send the gun thugs on us,
Yeah.
Just trying to agitate and say, like, it's not fair. We're trying to fight for when we speak up here, nobody's there to stop violence when it happens to us.
Yeah. And like, she gets increasingly violent, and it's really kind of cool.
Yes. That's a theme we'll see with a few of the activists. We'll get into that kind of escalation of violence. So the picketers show up. It looks like it's where the main road where you turn off to go into the entrance to the mine, I think, is where they were set up.
Yeah, that's how I read it.
They set up there and they start trying to like block people from coming in. Block the scabs from coming in. And they kind of know that, like, the cops are going to come out there and they're going to be on the coal operator's side, the scab's side. Mm-hmm. And they are, because they call them out there pretty quickly, and the cops come up and they're like, oh, you can't block the road and stuff like that. And the way that these people were interacting with the police.
I'm going to read you my note verbatim. Love this rowdy ass crowd harassing cops to their faces and pushing scabs vehicles. Completely unafraid. Just like, fuck you. Just pushing vehicles away. Just like starting shit.
Yeah, it was awesome. And they just had a complete disrespect basically for the cops.
It was hilarious.
This guy was like making fun of this cop. Like, I can't believe this family, has a cop here. What a disgrace to his name.
That was so funny.
Like, hell yeah.
He told the documentary person, get a shot of this dude.
Yeah. And they were like, this one guy was like talking about, oh, what if I took this cop's gun or whatever? I was like, oh my goodness.
I didn't hear that.
This guy would just get killed today.
Oh, I know. I was so surprised.
Them.
A side note, I watched this with subtitles on, and subtitles do a very bad job interpreting Southern accents. I feel like I got more of it than the subtitles did.
I did too, yeah. All those inaudibles, or most of them anyway, I got.
For the most part, yeah. I was like, oh, I know what they're saying.
Yeah. I will tell you, I watched this on YouTube the first time I watched it, and the autogens were way worse than than the HBO ones. So. But yeah, so they show, there's this conflict at the intersection. I think even before they were going out there was this one guy, and he's one of the recurring focuses. Is he's saying we can't worry about the injunction. We can't worry about them saying oh, you can't go out there or whatever. He said the law. You can use the law to get out of trouble once you're in it, but don't keep trying to follow the law because it's designed to, prevent you from doing anything in the first place.
I thought that was a really interesting way to put that. He's basically what's the point of having lawyers if we can't fuck shit up?
Yeah, and later because the cops do bust in and arrest a lot of them. He says, it's just as well. You're a prisoner out there anyway.
I loved that line. You're a prisoner out there anyway. Might as well be in jail.
Yeah. That dude to me stuck out as a real kind of revolutionary figure. Yeah.
When they said the laws are set up against us, someone mentioned, I don't remember who, but someone mentioned that they're not allowed to call them scabs and they're not allowed to have weapons. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You should be able to call anyone whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, what is that? It's not a racial slur. You're choosing to do it.
And so I think they called them scalps at one point, which I'm like, to me, that's way more racialized, but okay.
Yeah, or at least threatening.
Yeah. And then the weapons thing, that keeps coming up, who's allowed to have guns or not. And because a lot of them had sticks and shit.
Little knives.
Is that a police law or a union law, or how does that work?
I believe that was just coming down from the judges. So what the company would do is go down to the court and say, these guys are fucking with us, and they would just be like, okay, well, they can't do this.
What the fuck? That's insane.
Well, you got into it, right, that the law wasn't made for them.
Yeah, it's not made for them, and that becomes more and more clear, and that's just one of the examples.
Another instance where the women are organizing, right, they say we got to do something about this, and they go lay down in the road.
Oh my gosh, I'd love to lay my fat ass in the road. Carry me.
Yeah, and then they were hauling them off, and they end up going to court as well. They're in jail first, and then they go to court, and they get this unfair treatment too. They get no help, and they know it. They stand up and they're just like, this is rigged, this is bullshit. You guys haven't been doing anything for us, pretty much.
Yeah, they weren't called forward to testify or anything. So someone was like, excuse me, can I fucking say something?
Yeah, someone says oh, this wasn't fair. That judge was a coal operator himself, and that was true.
Oh my god,
that guy was indeed Judge Hogg. He was a coal operator. Of course he's not going to give them. It's ridiculous.
And then they show the women in the cell block, and they're all just like, this is fucking stupid. And fucking Lois is just like, go get me a gun next time. Fuck it, I'm in.
Yes, yeah. People start, I love it because it's the gradual evolution of because they go in, they're like, okay, sure, we're going to be confrontational, but we're not going to go in trying to actually fight violently.
Yeah, and you see these conversations happen. At one point, there is a conversation with strikers oh yeah, we can't just go be nonviolent anymore. Like, it's just not going to fucking work.
Yeah. People, I think this is what Marx and Engels and Lenin have talked about, is that the revolutionary potential of a union is that it can help teach workers about revolution through struggle, through class conflict. Like, that's how they learn how to do revolution, or what's required, what won't work, and what will work, sort of thing.
Yeah.
All right, so they interview a guy named Norman Yarborough, a representative guy from Eastover Mining Company. So that's the subsidiary.
The fucking balls on this guy.
Yeah, he said something that he didn't think women should revert to this sort of behavior or something.
Yeah, he was just like, I just don't ask him about that. Like, what do you think about the women's movement in this strike?
And he's like, I should hope my wife wouldn't do something like this. And I was just like, fuck off, dude.
She probably should strike. You sound like a shit husband. And then they ask him, is it true that you're providing housing for these miners that don't have running water? Yeah. And he says, yes. And then he gives like the most mealy mouth answer ever of like, well, we're hoping in the future to provide better facilities, blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah. just a non-answer.
This is the best we can do right now. We really want to do more, but I would have to show up in a slightly less nice suit.
I wouldn't have a job because my job is probably nothing.
Yeah. Can't cut that corner, so we're going to have to cut their water, and that's where we are. It's because, I mean, like we said before, they're treated as second-class citizens. Like, they don't think that these people are worthy of running water, of modern amenities like that.
Yeah, just the conditions here, again, are just insane. Like, they talk about explosions with, like, what was the name of the famous explosion?
The Farmington, West Virginia. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the one that trapped people inside?
That one is, there's 78 people killed.
Oh my God.
4 survivors. And this was in 1968 when this happens. And like just before, they had been granted all these extensions. Because coal mines actually did have like safety regulation.
And they were inspected 16 times. So
yeah,
someone came by and said, this isn't safe, fix it 16 times in a row.
And then there was a reason it was caused was a buildup of coal mine dust and of methane.
Okay.
And
that seems bad.
Eventually, boom.
Yeah.
Killed 78 people.
Jesus.
Interestingly, we'll get into this character a little bit later, this historical figure, Tony Boyle. He was the UMWA president at the time, and this was a UMWA mine. And he responded by basically saying, hey, lay off the coal operators. Like, they're not to blame for this. It's not their fault.
Insane. Great president.
Yeah, for real. They've had those sorts of disasters, a lot of different disasters, really. Yeah. And they had I guess, congressional testimony where they were talking to like this coal industry person who was like, oh, we definitely are all about safety, safety, safety. And then the Bureau of Mines guy, like maybe ex-Bureau of Mines or something, he was saying like, I mean, I know you're saying that, but I worked in the office and like, we don't.
Of course not.
It was like an admission almost. He was like, we didn't do, our job, basically.
Like, there's just so many preventable disasters, both in the sense of like, what if you had a safer workplace, and also in the sense of like, what if we didn't like do this anymore?
Yeah, that too. It's interesting because so much of it is focused on like, let's make sure we get people medical care and stuff. And that's kind of good. Like, you do need to get medical care, but it would also be nice not to have like these medical conditions in the first place,
Yeah, so they do a segment on black lung, and they interview people who are in various stages of it, but like their lungs are basically deteriorating, and they talk to a doctor who's just like, yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. Like, there's no treatment for this. It's just, once it starts, it starts. Yeah. All you can really do is just like put them on oxygen and just wait. It was really fucked up. So the way their disability benefits work is they basically work you until you are physically just wrecked, just completely disabled, unable to breathe. And then that's when you can get disability. Yeah. So you're basically signing up for a death sentence.
Yeah. And they were, everyone knew it. It was just, that's how things were. Yeah. Black lung, they talk about how it's like widespread in the community. That's partially as a result of like actually mechanization in mining.
Oh, really?
Because they have like the continuous mining machine that's like busting up all the coal and making coal dust and everything.
Yeah.
That's kind of why it got worse.
Yeah.
More so than with more manual mining techniques. I like the testimony they gave. The
attorney?
showed from that. Yeah, it was like, it's not true that inhalation of coal dust in the lungs necessarily results in the impairment of pulmonary function.
What the fuck does this guy think causes it? Like, it's just a weird coincidence that all these people in a coal mine happen to not be able to breathe. Weird.
Strange. Yeah, it's like the tobacco, research people.
It felt very much like that.
And I thought it was interesting because they said that other countries had eliminated black lung. I mentioned Australia, England, Germany. I don't know what the deal was there. Like, why couldn't we do whatever they're doing?
I know. I was wondering that because you're saying like the mechanization process, like, did they find a better machine that doesn't do that? Like, or are they just like, yeah, we're going to stop doing coal? Like, I would love to know what's going on there.
Yeah.
It's probably just expensive. And so that's why they don't do it.
Almost certainly.
Ugh. So in the light of all that, if you're like, I don't know, if you're in the pocket of coal, I guess, you're saying, well, they would do all these safety things. They would pay them more. They would give more benefits, but then they wouldn't like be able to, pay them as much or, whatever. You're saying there's not enough to go around.
Yeah, there's thin profit margins. They don't make up. They're just a humble coal operator.
They show us stats, and a coal company profits are up by 170%. In comparison, the miners' wages are up 4%. And if in case you're like, well, at least they're keeping up with inflation and stuff. No, cost of living was up 7%.
Ouch.
So there's fucking enough to go around.
And the miners are basically losing money.
Yeah.
And the operators are making money hand over fist.
Yeah. And one worker puts it perfectly. It's like, well, coal companies are an energy company. Like, that's like the richest kind of company you can be.
They're energy conglomerates. This company, Duke Power, is still around. It's Duke Energy.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's on the stock exchange. Its net income in 2020 was $1 billion. Total assets of $162 billion. So they have enough.
They have enough. That is my least favorite myth, is that there's not enough. I'm like, no, there's fucking enough. Even if you want to be extremely eco-socialist about it, there's enough. Like, indigenous people have been doing it for a long fucking time. We could do it. And this is, kind of a sidebar. It's very frustrating to see the discourse turn, like a sharp, I guess, right turn from like just straight up denial of climate change to now, like, fuck it, we're all dead. Which, like, I definitely feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, it just dumps that responsibility away. Just like, no, we're not going to deal with it. We're just going to space.
So here's another thing about that, though, and it is similar pessimistic, I guess, vein, because pessimism is almost realism now. But like, even if you're saying, oh yeah, but we're heading towards a mass extinction, and okay, I mean, that's given our state of not wanting to change things, it's a very big possibility. Even when you're talking about that or the end of all these things, humanity will still probably like be around.
There's going to be something.
So like, if we're not making changes now, drastic ones, or whatever change we can manage to pull off, if we're not doing that, we're just making it even worse. Like, fewer and fewer survivors from the impending catastrophe, It's like damage reduction at this point, harm reduction.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's a pessimistic view. Theoretically, we could
turn
fix
around,
everything,
but that would need, there's a laundry list of things we would need.
Starting with revolution.
I would say yes. Okay. I want to talk about this fucking weird cop.
I love this dude. My God.
I found myself saying the words aloud last night. I love this cop. And that hasn't happened in a long time or ever.
I think it was because he was self-aware, sort of.
I think he was. I think he was just like, whatever, man. Like, okay, so let's back up.
Yeah.
So the strikers end up traveling to New York to like raise publicity about the issue and be like, here's what's going on. This company's treating us like shit. We're here to try to like tell people about it. And they're like in there and they're like coal mining hats and shit, handing out flyers, wearing those like placard thingies.
Yeah, I think they were outside of like Wall Street, you know, or the stock exchange.
Yeah. And this guy, one of the strikers, starts up a conversation with a cop. And I'm like, oh, God. But then it starts out pretty well. The cop's like, well, you guys probably get paid all right. Like, what do you make? And the guy tells him, he's like, oh, I make more than that. And I think that was key. Because I think as a culture, especially, I know you and I were raised to not talk about money and salary and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that is so key in breaking down, like, kind of capitalism's grip on people. It's just to be transparent, be like, yeah, this is where my money comes from.
Yeah.
And so they start talking about, like, what benefits do you have? And, like, the cop realizes, like, no, this is actually really shitty for them. Like, they don't have dental. They have really shitty healthcare, like, all this stuff.
Well, he has it pretty sweet. I mean, he says, like, yeah, we get free healthcare, free dental. He gets to retire at 36 at half pay. And he adds, like, for what? I just stand here. It's
yeah, because the guy asked him, like, well, is your job dangerous? And he's like, no, do you see what I'm doing right now? I'm just standing on a street corner. Like, that's my job.
And I like that he was kind of aware of that. He was like, this is bullshit. I don't know.
Yeah, he's like, your work is, like, actually dangerous, and I get paid more to do nothing. So, yeah, if you want to see the world's one good cop from 1970s, check out this documentary.
We'll get into this a little bit later, I guess, when we see the sheriff.
Oh, God.
We'll talk about I don't know, because this cop, like, he was good as a person, it seemed like. You know, he was fine. I mean, he's still, like, a class enemy. You know, he's still doing the wrong thing by being a cop.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't require him to be a jackass personally to be on the wrong side, you know? Like, he was personable and might realize at some point, like, this is fucked up, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you had put him in Harlan County and he was in charge of enforcing, like, fucking ridiculous strike laws, then, like, yeah, he'd be an asshole. And I'm sure he's an asshole to fucking black people because this is in the 70s and, like, you know, we're about to get into broken windows policy era in the 80s. So, like, he's probably going to stop and frisk every black person he sees for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So it really depends where you are. If you're in a weirdly idyllic town where nothing bad happens, then like you can probably be a nice cop, but like
oh sure.
But if you're in a place that has like shit laws, then like yeah, you're gonna enforce some shit laws.
Yeah. It's kind of what we say sometimes when we're talking about capitalism doing these things, right? It's like there's no back room, there's no twirling mustaches. There are some CIA plots, but in general, it doesn't rely on anybody being personally evil. They just do bad things in the course of their job. Yeah,
definitely. All right, let's get into the weird union politics.
Oh yeah. So I thought this was interesting. It's kind of a break or they just start telling a different story for a little while.
Yeah.
About the United Mine Workers power struggles, I guess.
Yeah, so the guy in charge before was Boyle, Tony Boyle.
He was, the UMW had a history of, very strong presidential figures. John L. Lewis is one person that they showed before, and he was like in the Roosevelt days and stuff, and he was autocratic and things, but he got shit done. Those eyebrows were also insane. Yeah, and he definitely like fucked up sometimes and did some bad things. So I don't want to say he was a superhero or anything, but he initially had done some good stuff. Point is that when Boyle gets into office, he is autocratic in that way, but he's not liked at all. Like everyone thinks he's an asshole. Yeah. So he really only held power through kind of corruption, basically. Yeah, that's kind of the sense I got from the union as a whole. I thought it was interesting. There's this I'm so super curious about like where it starts switching over. But like when you see the local union meetings, you're just like, yeah, everyone here is cool on the same page, like fucking yeah. And then like you hear from the national heads and stuff and you're like, I don't know, I don't trust these people. Like, well, but yeah, because they're suits. I mean, they're more powerful, they're more businessy, they're more bureaucratic. And the thing is, they're in talks with the company. So, like, I'm not saying they're necessarily, like, palling around with them, they're BFFs, but, like, when you have more interactions with them, you're probably more likely, or less likely to be agitating them. Exactly. What we said about Farmington, right? After that, Boyle comes out and he's like, what? These guys are trying their best, Like, he should have been out there saying, what the fuck? Let's get these guys. I want heads on pikes,
That's the thing is, I think people are uncomfortable with that kind of pushing, even from people who are on your own side. I say people generally. Leftists are extremely comfortable with that. We will call everyone out for no reason. But I'd say, I think like mainstream people, especially Democrats, are like, you can't say anything bad about a fellow Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our guy. He's on our team. When it's like, no, you need to be yelling at him to do better. Like, you can always do better.
Yeah, and you see the same thing, I guess, here with local people saying like, Boyle, kind of an asshole, versus like the leadership saying, oh, Boyle, he's good, you know. Yeah, it's in 1969. They have a campaign for the presidency of UMW, and they have as an opponent to Tony Boyle a guy named Jock Yablonsky.
Yeah. Real quick, Boyle does say basically he wants to be president for life, which is just a terrifying thing to say in almost any context. Unless you're talking about like your Animal Crossing island, even then, it's a little weird.
Yeah,
a little
maybe
aggro.
like First Citizen or Comrade or something. I don't know.
Anyway, so yeah, this little Yablonsky guy, tell me about him.
Well, Yablonsky was kind of running a reformist campaign, and he was trying to introduce greater democracy, more autonomy for local unions. He was more more directly tied to the workers. And so whereas Boyle would go and try to be conciliatory with the owners and operators.
More top down, and Yablonsky was more bottom up.
Yeah. And he wanted to be holding the owners and operators like to the contract and shaking them when things went wrong. And they have this election in December of 1969, and it looks really like pretty rigged. Boyle wins by a margin of nearly 2-1.
Okay.
80,000 to 46,000. Yablonsky concedes because he's like, well, I mean, he stuffed the ballots. I don't know.
Something happened.
But then later on, he asked the Department of Labor to investigate the election for fraud. He filed some lawsuits. And in December of that year, he gets murdered.
Yeah, not just him, but his wife and daughter, too.
Yeah. His wife, Margaret, 25-year-old daughter, Charlotte, killed at their home. There were 3 hitmen who did the killings. They found out that Boyle had ordered it after the 2 had gotten into a shouting match. He gave one of his subordinates $20,000 that he had taken from the union funds.
Wow.
To go hire gunmen to kill Yablonsky, and so that's how it went down.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, they show him being taken in, and he's kind of jokey about the whole thing. They're like, what do you know about it? And he's like, oh, well, and then he stops and kind of laughs. He's like, my lawyer says I'm not really supposed to tell you. And I'm just like, fuck you, man.
Yeah.
You are just unapologetically evil.
Yeah, real asshole. Eventually, they do convict him in 1974 and sentence him, and he ends up dying in prison. I mean, he doesn't get out.
Yeah. Then Miller gets elected.
Yeah, they have another election. I think this is in 1972. After the whole, I guess, murder trial and everything's going on, and Boyle is still running for re-election versus a new reform candidate. And this time they have a whole reform movement, the Miners for Democracy.
Yeah. I was confused. I was like, wait, is this a sub group? But I guess yes.
It's like a faction.
Yeah,
like a faction in the United Mine Workers of America Union. And their new reform candidate is Arnold Miller.
Yeah.
And he's more plain spoken. He seems like he kind of comes up from rank and file.
That was his favorite phrase. Was rank and file.
Oh, yeah.
Every time he spoke, he used that phrase.
Well, that's like Bernie Sanders with working people or whatever.
That's true.
It's the common people, I guess. Regular folks. People. And he runs against Boyle and wins. 56,000 members still voted for Boyle. Weird, but
very weird.
70,000 voted for Miller.
There you go.
And so they kind of tell that story as this fight for union democracy. This what was the national union, and then in relation, how are the local unions kind of handling that? Yeah.
So one thing they keep referencing in this film is Bloody Harlan, which is something I've heard about, but I don't know what it is. Can you tell me what it is?
Sure. Yeah, let's do this sidebar. The first time I watched this too is it's ominous. They keep kind of mentioning it like it's this hidden lore. But
all these old people are like, I don't want to go back to that. Like, I remember. And I'm just like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah, it's like the winter in Game of Thrones or something. You know?
Yeah.
You sweet summer child. You don't remember Bloody Harlan. But they never, they don't actually explain in the documentary. So,
yeah.
Bloody Harlan County, or the Harlan County Wars, is a conflict that happened in the 1930s.
Okay.
It's part of the larger Coal Wars, less cool version of Star Wars. Everything's just coal-fired.
It's the steampunk version. Oh, no.
Yeah. But the Coal Wars were labor battles set in coal mining towns, spanning from like 1890 to the 1930s.
Okay.
In 1931, Great Depression has struck.
Yes.
Lots of people out of work. The coal mine owners, they're like, shit, we still got to get people to buy coal. So they're like, we're going to cut the price. But to not lose so much money, we're going to cut miners' wages too. 10%.
Oh, God. Okay.
These guys, they can probably handle it, right? Since we're in the middle of depression, they don't need money. Yeah, no
problem. Perfect time to cut people's wages.
And so the UMW comes in, the union comes in to try to organize.
Okay.
And get people to join the union. But when people join the union and the bosses find out, they fire them and evict them from their company housing or anybody they suspect is associating with the union.
Okay.
Right. So this is kind of how it gets started and how you have like so many people fired and evicted and then trying to like strike against the workers that the company's bringing in to keep production going. Mm-hmm. At the time, you have a sheriff named J.H. Blair, who's a complete piece of shit, but I guess I repeat myself. He's a sheriff. And he was totally on the owner's side. He was quoted as saying, I did all in my power to aid the operators. There was no compromise when labor troubles swept the county and the Reds came to Harlan.
This is obviously a theme. But I think it's fascinating that we've talked a lot about how police are there to protect property.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just this very clearly binary choice of like what is more valued in this country and in the world. Let's be real. I don't think there's anyone that's really getting this completely right.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's really just looking at saying like, okay, this company has more rights than these people. Like, even though they're like, one of them is being killed and brutalized by like their bodies and this resource extraction, like in various ways. Mm-hmm. This company's money is more important. Like, it's just such a very clear choice to me. And I don't know how, especially in these scenarios, like of just physical labor like this, I don't know how anyone could see that differently.
Yeah. That's something we saw right in the Black Lives Matter protests. Mm-hmm. Anytime it got to, if we break a window at Target, I mean, let's bust skulls. Like, those are not equivalent.
Those aren't the same thing. Like, what are you doing
in our
here?
society, one is worth more than the other.
Yeah.
Because it's capitalism. You have to buy another mule. You have to buy another store window, but you can always get another person.
Yeah. Ugh. Anyway, this sheriff, piece of shit.
This sheriff, he's an asshole. He deputizes these gun thugs who are working like for the company.
Okay.
Whoever they wanted to go in and bust this stuff up, he would just hand them a sheriff's deputy badge, and then they would have the power of the law behind them when they went to go do the bidding of the coal mine owners.
Okay, so sheriff basically is like, I'm not the sheriff anymore, the company is.
Basically.
Yeah.
And so this basically gave them the right to go, evict people. Because you have to use force to evict people.
Yeah.
They're not just going to be like, oh, yeah, I guess you told me to leave, I'll leave. You have to have a threat of force, and so that's what they were doing.
Holy shit. So just police kicking people out of their homes. Mm-hmm. I'm sure also doing terrible things on the way.
I mean, there's violence. People don't like that. They fight back.
Yeah,
there's shots fired on both sides. May 1931, I mean, you've got deaths on both sides. The Kentucky National Guard is called in. Not to, keep the peace.
Not to protect the people getting kicked out of their houses. No.
But to break the picket lines, of course. They used tear gas. Mm-hmm. Sheriff Blair also rescinded the right of assembly in the county. Just took that part out of the Constitution.
Okay.
Just nope.
Cool.
I just think that's a great look for people who are like all about law and order. Well, that's like the law.
That's a
it's
law.
The Constitution.
You should keep that one.
Not that I think that we should revere the Constitution, but like,
Yeah, no.
if you're going to say you are, I can call you hypocritical when you don't.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. They don't care.
Yeah.
They like their particular laws whenever it suits them for the right people.
By June 17th, 1931, the initial strike had failed. The miners were going back to work. The UMW withdrew all support.
Shit.
And there were no concessions. It was just beaten. But next, the communists came in.
Oh, I love those guys.
Yeah. And they were going to try to organize the coal mines, kind of same as the UMWA had tried to do.
Okay.
All right. And they sign up 4,000 workers. This is the openly communist. And when we say openly communist, we mean they were like set up by the Communist Party USA, like CPUSA.
Nice.
This was the National Miners Union.
Okay.
This is not from out of nowhere. Like, the CPUSA at this time starts out the decade with 7,500 members and ends at 55,000. So, like, they were fast growing during the 30s. And so they set in, they started doing this unionization drive and doing more local relief and setting up soup kitchens for the striking families, really trying to get this going.
Yeah, and we've mentioned CPUSA before here, and it makes sense. Like, you have this devastating economic situation. You have people who are just like, hey, clearly this system didn't work. What the fuck do we do now?
Let's try communism.
Yeah, if you provide for people, turns out they like it. It's super weird. I don't understand it.
And you're providing a need for the people. It's kind of like with the Black Panther Party, right?
Yeah.
You're providing a need for the community because you're following like the Maoist tactic of the mass line. Like, you're finding out what people need and delivering it. And remember, they're talking to them and saying like, I don't care about communism, about socialism. I'm here because we need this, and if they learn it along the way, great.
Cool. And you want to talk for the people, by the people. Sounds like it's communism to me, baby.
Yeah. And so, of course, these soup kitchens were welcomed in the community among the people, but not among
there we go.
elites, right?
Yeah.
And they sent the gun thugs on the soup kitchens even.
Once again, if you find yourself forcibly taking down a soup kitchen, maybe check yourself.
Yeah. Are we the baddies?
Yeah, where did your life path go wrong?
They started beating up miners in their homes.
Oof.
This is where the song, Which Side Are You On? Was actually written.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was written by Florence Reese.
Okay.
To the tune of an old like folk song called Jack Monroe.
Okay.
This was written after Sheriff Blair's men had ransacked her house, looking for her husband, Sam, who is one of these NMU union leaders.
Holy shit.
And they had tore the house upside down, just tore everything out and everything. And afterwards, she, scrawls this out, the words to it.
Yeah. Fuck.
But yeah, it was a crazy period of violence. It kind of drags on. Like, those are the main 2 years of conflict. The NMU strike drive is also killed. And that kind of gives way after those first 2 years to kind of an on-off sort of violent period throughout the rest of the 30s.
Jesus.
That's what Bloody Harlan was.
Not great. Okay. I can see why people are nervous.
Yeah. I don't know if this is the first instance of it or not, but we hear about this from Florence Reese herself, right?
Yeah.
Who's talking to a union meeting there. That was cool. She, at some point, says, we've got nothing to lose but their chains and their union to gain.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
I was like, hell yeah, someone's read her marks.
Yeah, man, she was great. And, like, she sings her song, and, like, it was really good. Yeah. Okay, let's get back to the picket line.
Yeah, back to the picket line.
Things are escalating.
Yeah, we're once again dealing with Basil Collins, the asshole.
Fucking Basil, the worst person.
He's a real dick.
He looks like a Tommy Lee Jones knockoff. Like, he would definitely play him in this dramatization.
That would be great, yeah.
Because he's wearing, like, all khakis, too. Like, that's very Tommy Lee, I feel like.
I think his pants, they looked a different shade, but they were khakis each, but they were,
Yeah.
like, they didn't match quite right.
It was a choice. Anyway, this guy fucking sucks. He basically, like, is the foreman, and he's always trying to lead all the scabs into work past the picket line. And so they always are, like, yelling at him and shit. And he, like, waves a gun at them. Just loves waving his gun around.
Yeah, he's already walking up there with, like, his hand on his pistol grip there, like he's gonna...
I hate that he doesn't have a holster. It's just, like, in his pocket. I'm like, that can't be safe. Like, okay.
Yeah, he's just very threatening the whole time, and
he
asking
sucks.
everybody their questions like, who are you?
Yeah, can I see your press credentials? And, like, I love the woman because she's just like, can I see your identification? Like, she does not give a shit.
Yeah, she gets them to answer a few questions, or like before finally getting back around to and then just saying like, yeah, fuck you, I'm not.
Yeah, they both, like,
very politely
kind of mutually say fuck you. Like, no, I'm not going to do it. Okay, me either. Bye.
Yeah. But he was terrible. The strikers are, again, still trying to, the strike at this point is like in his 10th month. They're still trying to block the road initially. You, like we said, with the escalation, like you still don't have guns on the striker side yet.
Yeah.
At that point. But then they get word that, like, this guy, Mickey Messer, who's the president of the local there, he got his house shot up by the company. They sent some machine gun guys to shoot his house up. And his wife talked about, like, we were laying on the floor trying to hide, basically.
Yeah, her and, like, their kids were just trying to hide from gunfire.
Normal country.
Yeah, totally chill. So yeah, throughout this, a lot of this film is showing these union meetings. We see some of our fave characters like Lois and this other lady. They get into it. Oh my gosh, full on, like, cat fight. Like, I've heard you are stealing husbands. It's insane.
Yes. This one lady says she was stealing husbands, and then I think Lois just counters with, you're an alcoholic or something. And they're yelling, and then this other lady steps in. I love it.
I love her.
We end up finding out her name, Sudie Crusenberry, who later becomes president of their group.
Yeah, and she's just like, I don't give a shit who you're fucking, whatever you're doing. Like, we got a job to do. Yeah,
it says, what are we here to do? It's not that. It's not arguing with each other. We need to win a contract. We are fighting for, our survival. Let's keep our eye on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I understand, though. I mean, I think when you do have such a hyper local organizing effort, like, it is very easy to fall into that. Especially, like we were talking about earlier, like, these women are going around making sure everyone shows up at every strike. And, like, it is kind of personal. Like, they're talking about, like, coming to pick people up to, like, go strike with you. Yeah. So, like, I understand how it can fall into that.
This is where we find out that Lois is going to start bringing a gun. To future events.
Yeah.
Just says, let's get as violent as they're getting.
Yeah, definitely. And, yeah, this is when the men are like, yeah, we got to do it, too. Like, I don't know what else we're going to do.
Oh, yeah. And then this is, I guess, where we see that the scabs someone starts shooting. It's really unclear what happens in the whole...
The night scene?
Yeah, the night scene. And then they're like, oh, here's Collins. He pointed a gun. So, I mean, he may have done some... I don't know. He seems like a guy who would do something.
He probably would. Yeah, they, like, knock the camera over. There's just yelling. It's very chaotic.
Yeah. So the next time we see them, they're talking about... I mean, we got to attack back. The police aren't going to help. We need to get out there. We need to bring guns. We need to be ready. Men and women, we're meeting at 5 a.m. at max. We'll tell you where we're going to be because it's not the same place. They're not going to get us again. Let's do it. So they go out, right?
Yeah.
And this is where they're blocking the road.
Yes. And Sheriff Dipshit comes up.
Yeah.
This is so... Okay, I love the conversations they have with the sheriff. Like, the women are all up in his face, just like, fuck you. Like, we got shot up by machine guns. I didn't see you coming to help us there, which is just, like, perfectly crystallizes the issue of, like...
They say you're biased, yeah.
Yeah. Like, of course you're biased. Like, you're not going to help us up there. And then... but you're going to come over here to help these scabs in and whatever. And then the sheriff goes, if you got $7, I'll go arrest Basil Collins right now. And they all just start emptying their pockets.
I thought that was hilarious because he's all like acting like there's nothing I can do. But then this lady shows him an arrest warrant. You're thinking, well, I guess he's got to go arrest the guy now. But that's like a bribe. Like, I need an arrest fee or something.
Yeah, there's a fee for it. First of all, I didn't know people could just make an arrest warrant. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. Did they just write it like a citizen's arrest?
Nah, I thought that, well, maybe I guess, but I thought it was like they found out that he had a record and they brought it to him. It was like, hey, Sheriff, did you know that he had, which makes it kind of funny in a way that the sheriff didn't know that he had a record.
I wouldn't put it past that. That guy looks like he's into shit, so yeah.
And so, they turn out their pockets and give him $7. And okay, so he came out there and he's like, now I mean business. You got to move these cars, right? But then when he goes over to Basil, he kind of puts his arms on the truck and he's like, well, Basil, looks like I might have to arrest you. Sorry. He's like chummy with him,
buddy.
Yeah. What the fuck?
Yeah. And he's like, oh, you can just drive your car downtown. Like, I'm not going to like actually arrest you.
Right. And then it goes back to the strikers and they're like, what the fuck? Are you serious?
Oh my God.
So one thing I thought was interesting about this, and we mentioned it with a cop in New York, is that this guy, like, he's, he's obviously on the side of the company.
Clearly.
But he's kind of like basically polite, I guess, or he's basically doing his job. But in the course of doing his job, he has to side with the company, and he's just like obviously taking a side. Which side is he on? He's on, he's with the company rather than the workers, and he may not be personally like a dick. He's still being an enemy of the working class. Yeah,
definitely. Like he's got his orders, and like at the end of the day, they cannot block these people from coming in because the company has more rights than they do.
Mm-hmm. So after that, I think the next thing is the parade.
Okay, I love this. So, and I love it because it totally caught me up. Like, it totally tripped me up.
Yeah.
So they have this big demonstration, like states from all around are coming to show their support. The National Union is here. They have music. They have like all kinds of shit. They have the president of the UMWA. Everybody's out here, right? And you're all like, oh, fuck yeah, solidarity.
Here we go. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then immediately afterwards, they have an interview with this guy.
Who is super cool, this guy. I don't know his name. This guy's
great.
He was awesome.
And he was just basically like, that was cool, but like, we should have done something with all those people. Like, if we had that many people, we could have gone, to fuck up the judge. We could have gone and expropriated all those machine guns they're using to shoot us with. Yeah. Like, we could have just taken over Duke Power offices. Like, this guy's just like, that's not enough.
Right. Shit, if they had followed this guy's advice, we'd be talking about a worker Soviet in Eastern Kentucky,
Yeah, and to me, that was just so perfect. And it's like the perfect crystallization of why nonviolence only will get you so far. Like, you can go raise awareness, you can go to a protest, like those things are all great. But like at the end of the day, if you don't have some fucking direct action, all you did was like make a lot of noise.
Yeah, exactly. The reason that the law is so obsessed with, and politicians and whoever are so obsessed with making sure that everyone follows the nonviolent path is because it doesn't work on its own.
Yeah.
Like, it won't do anything unless you make demands that are backed up.
Yeah. Because at the end, it's a power structure. And, like, people in power aren't just going to roll over and be like, you know what? You're right. Sorry, my bad. Like,
yeah, I didn't realize I was being an asshole.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do because, like, the nonviolent way would be like, okay, we're going to get really mad about it. And then what? The public opinion is going to, like, shame the company into paying more, or, like, somehow manage to boycott, which is not how coal works. You can't boycott one coal company. Like, you don't know where the fuck your energy comes from. Like, so there's no outlet in that case.
Yeah, and they'll get into it later and say, like, okay, the protests and the public campaign did kind of work, did kind of help. And we don't want to say that like you said, it's a good thing. We don't want to say it's bad.
It is. I don't want to say it's completely useless or anything, but I don't think it can be your one move.
No, it's not enough. If you're thinking revolutionarily, if you're thinking reformist, it may be enough. But you have to bet that we have, a habitable earth for enough time for communism to crawl around on its own, which probably won't happen. I mean, that's my argument, I guess, against reformism now is more from an eco point of view of like, we need to do it now. Like,
yeah. I mean, one of my favorite tweets from this past couple of weeks was someone being like, I mean, we got all the addresses of the top polluters. I'm just saying. We know where these fuckers live.
Yep.
Ugh. All right. Then we kind of get to the really tragic, I guess, end of the strike, or the beginning of the end.
Yeah. A scabbing son of a bitch named Bill Bruner shot Lawrence Jones in the face with a shotgun and killed him.
Yes.
Left behind a wife and a daughter. And so the next scene we see is a union meeting. And the members are saying, we want to escalate this. Like, this is fucked up. And the union itself is kind of saying, let's wait. We got to calm down. We got to talk to, the leadership and negotiate, right? Mm-hmm. But the workers, damn, this old man, I loved him. He was saying, we got these trees around and we got high-powered rifles, and I was there in the 30s, and we just get up there and we know who it is. It's Yarborough and Collins. They're the leaders. Let's get up there and gun them down.
Yeah, that guy was ready to fucking go. He said, hold my drink, bro.
Yeah, and I mean, hell, he wasn't the only one. People were applauding him. Like, that was, it was crazy to think about, kind of in light of what the interview we just talked about, right? What could have happened if they had followed another course, right? If they had brought all those people in to take over, or if they had followed this guy and started doing some assassinations, some direct action. I mean, shit, things could have turned out way differently.
Yeah, and when you look at it that way, it's just like, man, this young family just got destroyed. Like, what the fuck else are you gonna do? Like, now's not the time to tell me to calm down.
But that's what they do.
Yeah.
The union says basically the price has been paid. Mm-hmm. He was fighting for a contract. He died for the contract, and
now we're square.
If we can get a contract, then essentially it will have been worth it. Is kind of what they're saying.
Ugh, it's just insane. And they're going to move forward with this new contract. But first, I do want to bring up the fact that the murderer straight up got away with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bill Bruner was charged. They had witnesses who said that he shot Jones unprovoked, and the grand jury still did not indict him.
Would love to know the makeup of that grand jury and their affiliations with the coal mine, but okay.
Yeah, for real. Basically, and they interviewed someone, and he was like, if the roles had been reversed, whoever we shot, whoever did the shooting on our end would be in jail.
Yeah, this is where I think we get into that interesting split between like top down and bottom up kind of organization as far as the union goes, because like you said, the union's really pushing them to accept this contract, and so they do. Mm-hmm. And then I think they have an interview with, I don't think he's national, I think he's like regional. Hold on. His caption is just UMWA staff. His accent makes him sound like he's not regional. Let me put it that way. And
guy with the brown hair?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't think he is either.
Yeah. And he is just like, yeah, this is great. Like, he seemed pretty pleased with it. And then you talk to the workers about it, and they're just like, it's not fucking good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And someone was saying, yeah, maybe it was the same guy. He was saying, the same let's start a Soviet here guy who was saying, you gotta, in a union that is working for, basically for the workers, right? We're worker-directed union. You have worker-directed strikes, and once you win a contract, you start the next fight. You start demanding for the next thing. Like, he's basically just saying, like, let's keep doing, let's keep up the class war.
Yeah, he literally says they don't give you nothing for nothing, and it's like, ain't that the fucking truth?
Yeah,
like they will take whatever they can from you if they are able to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, again, not them being evil; it's them following their class interests. That makes sense for them.
If you find this maybe hard to relate to, if I'm not a fucking coal miner, and I've never even had a very physically demanding job before. But I mean, you can relate this to other industries too, like service industry. Like there is such a huge pressure applied to employees to not ask for time off and to always be available and all these things like you are essentially guilted into. And if there is not a law or something to stop them from abusing their workers, they'll abuse their workers. Like,
oh yeah,
we see that
with healthcare coverage, with any sort of benefit, pension or retirement, whatever.
Yeah. And, if you're, an office worker, like there's also the whole culture of overworking yourself. Like that's another way for them to squeeze more out of you. Like I have had jobs where like you're expected to work all the fucking time, just like whenever you're home too. And like, if you don't, like, you're not going to do as well there and you're not going to get the cool projects. And it's like, this definitely isn't legal, but like you're finding a way to get around it.
Power does not concede willingly, basically.
Yeah, like they're going to take what they can get from you. Like nobody's out there. I mean, you can have a personally nice boss, like we said, but at the end of the day, they want money.
Yeah. And the bottom line is more important than their relationship with you, basically.
And they'll try to justify it by being like, no, like I really believe in this business and like, no, we're a family. No, whatever. I just want to stall work hard. Sure. But at the end of the day, that's not their main goal.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not conscious is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Again, no mustache twirling. That's probably going to be a shirt to some sort of mustache twirling capitalist. But maybe it's not a conscious effort. It's like, I'm going to abuse my workers today. It's I need to make money. What can I possibly do to make money?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, this is, talking about maybe our more modern American professional sort of experience. But it's just it varies so widely, but I guess it still kind of follows the same basic template of class antagonisms, right? Of the workers versus the bosses.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to zoom out and take more of a global perspective, like that's why we have sweatshops. Like we can all agree those are horrible, inhumane conditions, just like one of the worst places you can be on the planet. Mm-hmm. But why do we have them? So we can have things for cheap and so people can not have to pay their workers more and so they can make more money. Like that's it. That's the reason.
Yeah. And it's it's not those countries like faults even most of the time. Like they're the companies that are in those countries are doing that so that they can serve, multinational companies based in like the imperial core, based in America and Western Europe and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
like,
You can't just be like, oh, India sucks because of that. Like, it's like, no, it's like American companies who are buying from them. So like, fuck off.
Yeah. And it's not just America too, like, because we're kind of a right-wing asshole country, but like even the nice social democratic countries, like
they still benefit from it.
It's their wealth and well-being and stuff is built on that exploitation.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, we got really mad about exploitation for a minute. That happens here.
Yeah. To continue kind of what happens here, the denouement of the story is they get the contract and then 3 months later, the national contract expires. So the UMW has to ratify a new one. And they don't agree on a new, they don't reach an agreement in time. They have another strike in 1974. And then 3 weeks later, they come to a tentative agreement that crucially leaves out the right of locals to strike.
I mean, this is just fucking bullshit. Like, if you take away their right to strike, what else can they do? Just say please? Like, there is no other course.
The union says, like, we make the decision to strike at the national level. So if you have a problem, right, then you file your grievance through the union, and the union will be like, yeah, we'll strike and support you, or no, we won't. And if they tell you no, that's what one guy was saying. If they tell you no, just like you said, what is the recourse? How can, what are we left with? Just because the union told us no, we're stuck now.
And again, it gets to that national versus local level where, like, they don't know what's going on. Like, they can, I guess you can call them up and be like, let me explain the situation here. But like, they don't fucking live there. They don't know the conditions.
Yeah.
And what's worse is that, who they do know is like the company.
Yeah. So it very much shifts it to more of a business union framework in that way. More, like the guy said, top down and less responsive, more bureaucratic.
Yes, definitely. Completely swiping the legs under from the whole local grassroots movement that we've been seeing throughout this documentary, and seeing really the success of that and how it brings that community together. So, yeah, I thought that was insane.
So they have the ratification vote. People complain about it and they say, this is bullshit. But then, they go back to work.
Yeah. Because, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I don't know. It's very frustrating because, again, the capitalist culture tries to convince us that, this is somehow a choice. This is somehow their fault. This is oh, just get another job. And it's what the fuck? There's no other jobs here. And also, you shouldn't have to do that. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. But, they do what they have to do, I guess, and they go back to work. The documentary goes into some music and then kind of recaps with some scenes and, what happens next sort of thing. The miners do some more protesting a year later in 1975. And then the next year they're protesting about court injunctions and stuff. But the ending, I guess, is kind of open ending.
I think so, yeah.
They are struggling still, they are still, the union's still doing stuff, but it does kind of look more and more protest oriented rather than strike oriented, maybe.
Something they mentioned earlier that I thought was really heartbreaking was someone was I don't think we would have gotten a contract unless that kid had died.
Yeah.
And that should not be what it fucking takes, but it seems like it is.
Yeah. I think it was sufficient to kind of push it over the top. The one guy does mention, and I think this is probably true, that, they did have publicity. They had the fight against, the company was also doing a rate increase. So there was a fight against that. People were it was taking a hit on the stock market. He said, our strike, did not shut down enough coal to hurt their stockpiles. But yeah, maybe, the death probably pushed it over and was enough to get it to end then and successfully. Again, it might not have succeeded without it. It was part of a multi-front war, I guess,
Definitely. And I think what's frustrating about that is that had the tables been turned and let's say, a cop got killed, it would have gone completely in the other direction.
Yeah.
And so you're just left with very little recourse. It feels very hopeless because it is designed to be that way, I suppose.
Even if you want to take the tactic of, okay, let's expropriate the machine guns. On the downside, you would probably be faced with the National Guard next.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
Is your Soviet Republic might be short-lived.
Yeah. I think that's something we come up against a lot, is just the idea of whenever you're ready to play ball, you better have everyone on fucking board. So, I don't know. That's where I'm well, maybe this podcast isn't useless.
No, I guess I don't think it is. To me, that was one of the questions that I was thinking about when watching this was, okay, from what I want to take from this sort of is, what should communists be doing in our lives, and to what's our goal, right? And because we like to be utopian and just kind of do some daydreaming, and that's fun, but what work, I guess, do we need to do to actually bring about the revolution one day?
Yeah.
Freeing humanity from capitalism.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, some people, they just post online and, hey, if that's what you can do, that's what you can do. Some people, they just podcast and, hey, if that's all you can do, that's all you can do, right? But I think getting into the unionization drives with whatever limitations are included, I think that's a big portion. Organizing in terms of mutual aid, in terms of political parties and things, and in terms of actual, maybe not as businessy or bureaucratic type unions, but more revolutionary militant unions, I think is going to be crucial to actually making revolution happen.
Well, I think what I was saying is that before you can get into that, you can't just walk up to someone, especially in the States, and say, hey, I'm starting a fucking paramilitary unit. You want to join up? Like we have a negative baseline to start from how people feel about communism in this country. So I'm going to pretend I'm going to give myself a pat in the back here. Say yeah, like people need to be onboarded to this to understand like, hey, here's why maybe like the things you've been told about why this system works, maybe it doesn't work, and maybe like there's a reason you've been told that this whole time, and like people need to know about this shit.
We're doing the demystification work.
Yeah. Okay. At least I like to think so.
Could be useful. And
could be useful.
Well, it could be useful mainly in the hands of, I think, our listeners more so than us. Like we can reach an audience, so. But our listeners can reach like an audience that is ready to listen to them that might not be ready to listen to us.
Yeah, because again, like the name of the fucking show, that's going to turn some people off.
yeah. And that's, so, that's okay. You got to meet people where they are. But I think that's where you guys can really shine.
Hell yeah. Get out there, listeners. Don't get beat up.
True.
But do your best. Review for this movie?
Review, like stars?
Like a star rating. Give me that stars.
All right. I'm going to rate it 5 stars.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I loved it. It's so like rough looking in terms of it's not, they're never using like a steady cam or anything really, but it's not like kitschy in any sort of way.
Yeah.
And there's no like narration, which I think is a cool feature of a documentary.
That's very interesting. That's my least favorite part about it. because I did not have the context of all the history in the way that I think you did. So you're just like, here's me back in my union shit. Like, I know what's going on. And I'm like, who the fuck are any of these people? So,
yeah. So less accessible unless you know what's going on.
I would do a quick Wikipedia read of Bloody Harlan, or like just have Google on the ready for whenever they're like, I can't even remember if they properly introduced UMWA or not, or if they just started using the acronym. Just like I had a little bit of trouble keeping up with it sometimes. Like, who the fuck is this? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's like, for example, like one part where I got lost, I think I mentioned this, when they're talking about Henry Miller starting his own subgroup. I didn't know that was a subgroup. I thought that was a new group.
Okay, yeah, the Miners for Democracy.
Yeah. Like, I was like, who the fuck are these people? Are we doing a different election now? Like, what's going on? Like, I could have used, I like it too when there's not a big narrator. I don't want like a heavy hand on it, but like, I could have just used every now and then being like, and here's what's going on right now, That's
fair. Tastes differ, as Lennon said.
As Lennon would say, tastes differ. That's another shirt. Let me write that down. I think I'm going to give it a 3.5 that's really my main criticism is that
hard to follow.
It's a little bit hard to follow, but I liked the style of it. I loved all the people in it. Like I'm a Lois stan for life. Love her. Yeah, it was good. The music was great. I think they did a really good job contextualizing like the conditions. My biggest gaps were like that base historical knowledge gap. And then I think I'm also like, because this was made in the 70s, now I'm super curious, like, what the fuck is it like now? Like, I only have a cursory knowledge from listening to the Trillbillies, but like, it's just, I'm super curious, like how that panned out.
Yeah, I will say to your point about like seeing the conditions there, I thought the film did a good job of showing that empathetically without showing that like feeling sorry for them or pitying.
Yeah, it wasn't like fetishizing how poor these people are or anything, or like look at these dumb hillbilly kind of things. It was very much just like, look at these people, like this is fucked up.
And then to the conversation about what things are like, more recently, you will recall maybe back in 2019, they had coal miner protests there in Harlan County again.
That's right.
That was from Black Jewel Coal.
Yeah.
And what they were doing was, they basically had gone bankrupt and were not paying people.
Yeah, I remember that.
They had been like paying them in cash under the table a lot of times and like doing all this fucked up stuff. And so they were blocking trains full of coal coming out of Harlan County. Mm-hmm. And they got a lot of publicity about that. And eventually they were able to, they ended the protest. They had found employment elsewhere by that point. Mm-hmm. because the company's gone, so it's not so much a strike, more as a labor protest in general.
I guess, yeah.
But they eventually ended up with $5.47 million awarded to the fired miners.
Holy shit, yeah.
From the bankruptcy settlement. So, they were successful, I suppose.
Yeah.
Putting forward their demands. That was in October of 2019.
Wow.
As far as the UMWA goes, it has done some actions recently. It's way smaller now than it used to be. Mm-hmm. It once had around 500,000 members in the 30s. By the end of 2018, they had 60,000 members and only a few thousand active coal miners. Most of them were retirees.
Oh, wow.
They had a few in other industries, but not very many.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of dying out and providing for its older retired members.
Oh, that sucks.
But they're still, they still exist. It was July 9th. They were on the picket line at the Warrior Met coal mine in Alabama, wearing tank tops that read "Scab Bullies."
Okay.
And the police were out there trying to get them to move their trucks, but nobody would say oh, this is my truck.
Oh my God.
Police officers asked them, who's in charge? And someone was like, everyone.
Oh, that's great. So what are we doing next week?
So next week we're going to take a look at the Mexican Revolution of 1910.
Hell yeah. I only have a passing knowledge of this from people I see on Money and my trips to Mexican museums, which I only understood about half the captions in.
Yeah.
So this will be great.
All right. Yeah. Hopefully this will be a good overview. Similar to our episode on the Russian Revolution, which, was a very complex subject that we kind of condensed. That's what's going to happen here, because the Mexican Revolution takes a long time. Mm-hmm. It's from 1910 till I kind of put it at 1920-ish.
That's a long time. Yeah.
Historians kind of differ on that, but whatever. And we're going to consolidate that. And throughout it, we're going to be focusing more on, through our socialist, communist, anarchist leading lens, leftist lens, we will be focusing on the social revolution part of that.
Cool.
So we're going to be focusing more on the popular demands. We're going to focus on some of the leaders of that, like Emiliano Zapata.
Hell yeah.
And ultimately kind of as the results of the revolution in terms of what did it do for the people.
In the meantime, you can find us online. We're on Twitter at teachcommunism, Instagram at teachmecommunism. You can send us an email, teachmecommunism@gmail.com. And you can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps people find the show. So do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can send us questions or suggestions or reviews or whatever. Just send us stuff and post about us, all that good stuff.
Yes, we appreciate it. Glowing reviews or probing questions, whatever it is.
Yeah. Constructive criticism. I'm into it. Yeah. I went to art school, so I got a thick skin on that. I'm good. We also are on YouTube if that's how you like to listen to podcasts, or if that's how someone else in your life likes to listen to podcasts and you're trying to do your little proselytizing, send them our way. And finally, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/teachmecommunism. For $5 a month, you get access to our notes for each episode, including the backlog. A very handy resource for up-and-coming leftists, or if you're just studying history or something and you got a test on some Russian stuff or whatever.
Yeah, or if you want, just to read a few diatribes or rants. Sometimes I include those, but I don't get to them in an episode, so...
Yeah, so this week we'll get both of our notes. Mine are mostly just LOL what? Reaction-based notes. Oh, and at the end of the year, all of the money from our Patreon goes to a local mutual aid fund. So yeah, do that.
Yes. Support the people.
Hell yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching this movie with me. Mm-hmm. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. You can join us next week on another episode of Teach Me Communism, where the class struggle is always in session.
Bye.
Goodbye.